When I found out I had inherited a 900-acre lake ranch, I honestly thought it was a dream. Wide open land, a private lake, and absolute peace. But that dream didn't even last one day. Because when I finally drove onto my own property, I didn't find peace waiting for me. I found a luxury mansion already built, and a woman standing in front of it who looked me in the eye and said, "You're trespassing. This land belongs to me." If you think that sounds crazy, trust me, this story only gets worse. I never expected a single phone call to flip my life upside down. The lawyer spoke calmly, almost casually, as he explained that a distant relative had passed away and left me everything she owned. At first, I assumed there had been some kind of mistake. People don't just inherit massive properties out of nowhere. But when the documents arrived, official deeds, land surveys, and tax records, the truth settled in. I was now the legal owner of a 900-acre lake ranch. This wasn't just any land. It was remote, untouched, and completely private. No neighbors, no HOA, no shared roads, just open wilderness and a natural lake sitting right in the middle of it all. It felt like freedom in its purest form. And if you're enjoying this story so far, take a second to subscribe, because what happened next still doesn't feel real. A few days later, I decided to visit the ranch in person. The paved road slowly disappeared, turning into gravel, then dirt. Trees closed in from both sides, and the air felt cooler and quieter. When the lake finally came into view, I stopped the car. The water was calm, reflecting the sky like glass. For a moment, everything felt perfect, as I had finally arrived somewhere I belonged. Then I heard construction. The sound didn't make sense out there. Heavy engines, metal clashing. As I drove closer, my stomach dropped. Right near the lake stood a fully finished luxury mansion. Tall windows, stone exterior, manicured lawn, a private dock stretching into the water. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't old. Someone had built a serious home here. I parked and stepped out, still trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was a caretaker's house. Maybe there was some legal agreement I didn't know about. Then I noticed the sign at the end of the driveway, "Private property, no trespassing." Under it was a name, Karen H. Before I could think further, the front door opened. A woman walked out with complete confidence, like she'd been expecting me to leave, not arrive. She looked me up and down and said, "What are you doing here?" I calmly told her this was my land, that I had just inherited it, that I was the owner. She laughed, not nervously, not awkwardly, confidently. "That's funny," she said. "Because this property is mine, you need to leave." I mentioned the legal paperwork, the boundaries, the surveys. She cut me off with a wave of her hand. "I've lived here for 3 years," she said. "I paid for this house. I pay taxes. At this point, it's basically my land." Basically. That word echoed in my head. She wasn't confused. She wasn't mistaken. She was convinced. And people who are that convinced don't back down easily. If this is already making you angry, make sure you're subscribed, because this situation escalates fast. I didn't argue, I didn't threaten her. I got back into my car and drove away, my mind racing. That night I checked every document again, every map, every boundary line. There was no mistake. Her mansion was inside my property. And that's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of a legal war. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mansion by the lake and the confidence on her face when she told me to leave my own land. I spread the documents across my kitchen table, property surveys, boundary maps, inheritance papers, and checked everything again. Slowly, carefully. There was no confusion, no overlap, no loophole. Her house was planted deep inside my property lines. The next morning, I called the lawyer. At first, even he was quiet. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "You're not the first person this has happened to," he explained. "Some people assume abandoned or inherited land won't be challenged. They build first and hope no one notices." That's when I learned about her strategy. She hadn't just built a house. She had filed temporary utility permits, used outdated boundary records, and quietly paid local taxes under a different parcel description. On paper, it looked messy enough to discourage questions. In reality, it was a calculated move, one designed to scare the real owner into walking away. I went back to the ranch a few days later, this time with printed maps and official documents in hand. I wasn't there to argue. I just wanted answers. Corinne met me halfway down the driveway like she'd been expecting me. She crossed her arms and smiled again, that same calm, superior smile. "I told you not to come back," she said. I showed her the papers. I pointed to the boundary lines. I explained clearly and calmly that her mansion was on land she didn't own. She didn't even look at the documents. "You really think paperwork beats possession?" she said. "I've been here long enough. I've invested too much. No judge is going to make me leave." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about land anymore. It was about ego. And if you're still listening at this point, you might want to stick around, because this confidence didn't last nearly as long as she thought it would. I sent the first legal notice that week. Her response came fast, too fast. Instead of backing down, she filed a claim stating the land had been abandoned and that her continuous use gave her rights. It was bold, risky, and completely false, but it forced the situation into court. Things escalated quickly after that. Surveyors were ordered, officials visited the site, and suddenly the mansion she thought was invisible became impossible to ignore. Every inspection revealed the same thing: wrong permits, incorrect filings, and a structure that never should have existed there in the first place. Corinne stopped smiling. She began avoiding direct contact. Her tone changed. The confidence turned into defensiveness, and then came the court date. Walking into that courtroom, I expected arguments and delays. What I didn't expect was how fast everything unraveled for her. The judge didn't need drama. The evidence spoke clearly. The boundaries were undeniable. The ownership was unquestionable. Corinne's mansion wasn't just illegal. It was trespassing. When the ruling came down, the room went silent. The judge ordered her to vacate the property and ruled that the structure had been built without valid ownership or approval. What happened next would change everything, financially, legally, and emotionally. And trust me, the fallout was far bigger than just losing a house. The ruling didn't end the conflict, it detonated it. Corinne didn't cry in court. She didn't argue either. She just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, like someone already planning her next move. I thought that once the judge made it clear the land was mine, this nightmare would finally be over. I was wrong, completely wrong. Within a week, she appealed. That's when things turned ugly. Construction trucks suddenly showed up again, even though she'd been ordered to stop all activity. Temporary fencing went up overnight. Signs appeared claiming disputed property. It was like she was trying to rewrite reality by force. If you're still following this, you might want to stay with me, because this is where it stopped being about property and started becoming personal. My lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. "She's trying to drain you," he said. "Delay, frustration, pressure. She wants you to settle." But I wasn't settling. A full forensic land survey was ordered, not the kind you can argue with. High-resolution satellite data. Historical land records go back decades. When the results came in, they didn't just confirm my ownership. They exposed how far she had gone to hide the truth. Her mansion wasn't slightly over the line. It was built hundreds of feet inside my land. Even worse, parts of it sat on a protected shoreline. That meant environmental violations, heavy ones, fines that stacked daily. Suddenly, this wasn't just a civil dispute. Regulatory agencies started showing up. Inspectors, environmental officers, people who don't bluff. Corinne's tone changed fast. She started calling, leaving voicemails, long ones. At first, she tried to sound reasonable. "We can work something out," she said. Then she tried guilt. "I put everything I had into that house." Finally, she tried anger, threats. accusations. She claimed that I was ruining her life. I didn't respond. The court moved faster than she expected. The appeal hearing was brutal. This time the judge wasn't patient. He went through the evidence piece by piece. The permits she claimed to have, invalid. The tax payments, filed under incorrect parcels. The abandonment claim, completely fabricated. At one point, the judge actually leaned forward and asked her a question that silenced the room. Did you ever verify ownership before building this structure? She didn't answer. That silence did more damage than any argument could have. The final ruling came down hard. Not only was she ordered to vacate immediately, but she was also held financially responsible for restoring the land to its original condition. That meant demolition, environmental repair, legal costs, mine and hers. The mansion by the lake, the one she built thinking no one would ever challenge her, was now a liability worth more than it ever was as a home. Outside the courtroom, she finally broke. She didn't yell, she didn't threaten. She just looked at me and said, "You didn't have to do this." I told her the truth. You did this the moment you decided someone else's land was yours. If you've made it this far into the story, you already know this isn't the end, so make sure you're subscribed. What happened next was something neither of us expected. Because losing the case didn't make her leave quietly. It made her desperate. And desperate people don't follow rules. The demolition day arrived with tension thicker than the morning fog over the lake. Trucks, cranes, and crews lined the driveway. Surveyors and inspectors buzzed around, cameras capturing every step. I stood on my property, watching the mansion that had caused months of sleepless nights finally face its reckoning. Corinne arrived late, her usual confidence gone, replaced by a mix of frustration and disbelief. She had spent years building that house, and now every brick was about to remind her who really owned the land. She approached me before the cruise started. "You didn't have to do this," she said, voice strained, almost pleading. I shook my head calm. "You did this when you built here illegally," I replied. The words weren't meant to hurt, they were facts, facts she could no longer deny. The first walls came down, wood splintered, glass shattered. Dust rose in clouds that caught the sunlight like golden smoke. Every hammer strike felt like a drumbeat marking the end of her control. People nearby had gathered silently, some whispering about the boldness, some staring in awe at how quickly power can shift. If you're still here with me, take a moment to absorb this, because the next moment changed everything. Corinne tried to intervene. She shouted, demanding someone stop the demolition. Security stepped in. Inspectors reminded her of the legal orders. Her words bounced off the walls, hollow and powerless. It was surreal, watching someone so certain of victory being forced to stand aside as reality dismantled everything she thought she owned. As the mansion crumbled, she moved closer to the lake, staring at the water like it could solve her problems. That's when I noticed something. Her desperation was palpable. Plans she had made for parties, private docks, and summer retreats were vanishing before her eyes. For the first time, she realized that the law wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a force that couldn't be ignored. The crew continued methodically, but Corinne's eyes stayed on me. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Watching her helplessness unfold, it became clear. Confidence is fragile when confronted with truth and boundaries. The mansion, once a symbol of arrogance and assumed ownership, was reduced to debris, concrete, glass, and splintered wood, a reminder that shortcuts never last. As the day ended, the dust settled over the lake, revealing the land as it should have been: clear, untouched, mine. Corinne walked away slowly, shoulders slumped, her voice barely audible as she muttered something about starting over. And in that silence, the weight of months of stress, legal battles, and bravado evaporated into the quiet of the lake. If you've stuck with this story so far, you're witnessing something rare. A clash of ego, greed, and law that ended not with vengeance, but with undeniable justice. And the final part, coming next, shows what happened after she left. why this story didn't end with just one mansion and the twist no one saw coming. Make sure you're following this story till the very last moment. After the mansion was gone and the dust had settled, I finally walked along the shoreline, breathing in the crisp air. The lake shimmered, reflecting the morning sun, untouched and peaceful, exactly as it should have been. For months, this land had been a battlefield of egos and legal papers, but now it was mine, truly mine. The freedom I had imagined on the first day I inherited the ranch finally felt real. Karen didn't return. Rumor had it she moved across the state trying to rebuild her life elsewhere. But the lessons remained here on my property. Confidence isn't power, possession doesn't equal ownership, and shortcuts always come with consequences. I spent the next days walking the property, clearing debris, making small repairs, and imagining the peaceful mornings I'd longed for. For the first time, I could actually picture life on the lake without tension or fear. It wasn't just about reclaiming land. It was about reclaiming control over my own life. Every tree, every inch of soil, every ripple in the lake reminded me that ownership came with responsibility, patience, and the courage to stand firm. People might hear the story and think it's about a mansion or a legal battle, but for me, it was about boundaries, respect, and finally being able to call this paradise my home. I still pass the spot where the mansion once stood. Sometimes I imagine what it looked like in its prime, and sometimes I imagine the chaos it caused. But now that chaos is behind me. The lake is calm again, the woods whisper, and the ranch stretches out, waiting for the life I've always wanted. And honestly, this story taught me something that no court, no survey, and no legal document could have. Patience and perseverance always win. If you followed this story to the very end, you've seen the rise, the fight, and the eventual triumph. The mansion may have been built on my land for a brief moment, but it couldn't stand against truth, evidence, and persistence. And that's the final lesson of the 900-acre lake ranch. No one can claim what isn't theirs, no matter how confident they are. Now every morning I wake up to the sunlight dancing on the water, knowing this land and its story belongs to me. And that feeling, priceless. Ain't want to miss it.